Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Today, in this lecture, we will discuss Aristotle's theory of tragedy and the Greek terms used in the tragedy. So, there's a big list of all these terms, and we'll discuss at the end of this session. So, number one, according to Aristotle, tragedy could be defined as a tragedy is the imitation of an action that is serious and also as having magnitude, complete in itself, embellished in language, with each kind brought in separately in the parts of the work. In action, mean in dramatic form, not in narrative form, but incident arousing the emotion of pity and fear, wherewith to accomplish its catharsis of such emotion. So, following are some important terms which are being explained by Aristotle and other critics as well. So, these are relating to the tragedy and the poetics. So, number one, let me discuss number one, hamartia. This term, according to Aristotle, he describes it like that. So, Aristotle discusses hamartia in poetics as an aspect of character, but rather as an incident in the plot. So, what Aristotle means by hamartia might better be translated as tragic error. Caught in a crisis situation, the protagonist makes an error in judgment or action and missing the mark, and disaster results. So the character, particularly the protagonist, he makes some error of judgment and he is missing some mark, and because of this, as a result, what happened? He faces a calamity or catastrophe at the end. So hamartia can be exemplified by the different way. Hamartia can be further explained as the fall of the nobleman caused by some excess of a mistake in behavior, not because of a willful violation of the God's law. Hamartia is related to the hubris, which was also an action then attitude. So the mistake of the hero has an integral place in the plot of the tragedy. The logic of the hero's descent into misfortune. So his descent into the misfortune is basically determined by the nature of his or her particular kind of hamartia or error of judgment. So let's go to, there are some example given in the different plays as the Oedipus king. This is, he faces a tragic situation. So a tragic situation possible was the unwitting murder of one of family member by another. So mistaken identity allows Oedipus to kill his father Laius on the road to Thebes and subsequently to marry Jocasta, his mother. Only later does he recognize his tragic error. However, because he commits the crime in ignorance and pays for it with remorse, self-mutilation and exile, the plot reaches resolution or catharsis, and we pity him as a victim of ironic fate instead of accusing him of a blood guilt. So there's another example of Hamlet. You can just have a look on that. Then let's go to the anagnorisis. Anagnorisis, also known as discovery. Originally it meant recognition in its Greek context, not only of a person but also of what that person stood for, what he or she represented. It was the hero's suddenly becoming aware of a real situation, and therefore the realization of a thing as they stood. And finally, it was a perception that resulted in an insight the hero had into his relationship with often antagonist characters within Aristotelian tragedy. So, anagnorisis is basically a discovery that happens later on to the character, and then he feels remorses, and this brings a downfall for him. For example, Aristotle was the first writer to discuss the uses of anagnorisis and peripeteia caused by it. He considered it the mark of superior tragedy, as when Oedipus killed his father and married his mother in ignorance and later learned the truth. So that was the anagnorisis. This was the discovery to him. It was a knowledge for him that what he had already committed. So it happens in the place like that. Then comes the peripeteia. Peripeteia is a reversal of circumstances and turning point. The term is primarily used with reference to the work of literature The English form of peripeteia is peripety. Peripety is a sudden reversal dependent on the intellect and logic. Aristotle defined it as a change by which action veers round to its opposite, subject always to our rule of probability and necessity. According to Aristotle, peripeteia, along with discovery, is the most effective when it comes to drama, particularly in the tragedy. Let's see the example. In Sophocles' Oedipus text, the peripeteia occurs toward the end of the play when the messenger brings Oedipus news of his parentage. In the play, the Oedipus is fated to murder his father and marry his mother. His parents, Laius and Jocasta, try to forestall the oracle by sending their son away to be killed. But he is actually raised by the Polybus, a shepherd, and his wife Merope. So this is how the peripeteia happens in different plays. Now let's go to the next term, and that is catharsis. Aristotle basically described catharsis as the purging of the emotion of the pity and fear that arose in the viewers of the tragedy. Debate continues about what Aristotle actually means by the catharsis, but the concept is linked to the positive social function of tragedy. Aristotle writes that the function of tragedy is to arouse the emotion of pity and fear and to effect the catharsis of these emotions. So Aristotle has used this term, the term catharsis, only once, but no phrase has been handled so frequently by critics and poets. Catharsis has three meanings. It means purgation, purification, and clarification, and each character has used the word in one or the other senses. All agree that tragedy arouses fear and pity, and there are sharp differences as to process the way by which arousing of these emotions gives pleasure. So let me go forward. Purgation, it is a sort of religious frenzy that Aristotle says, and it creates a psychological effects. So we purgate ourselves by just relieving ourselves of such religious frenzy. And purification is a purification of emotion like anger, pride, fear. It is sort of allopathic treatment. Thomas Taylor and Butcher approves it. And then clarification, emotion must be clarified by the elimination of anger and fear. So this is how these four important terms of the tragedy mostly occur in the play, and Aristotle prove all these four terminologies. Then we need to move forward for the Greek terminology, the term used in the tragedy. So the next one, let me just introduce to you this one. This is called as the prologue. The prologue is that part of the tragedy that precedes the entrance of the chorus. And the second one is here in this list. The parody is the first utterances of the chorus. Then parados. A parados was one of the two gangway on which the chorus and actor made their entrances from either side into the orchestra. Then exode. The exode is that part of tragedy not followed by the choral song. Hubris, pride, essentially in attempting to go outside or beyond human knowledge, action, or capacity. Often hubris is a direct violation of the will of the god. Then anapest. Anapest is a meter associated with marching. The following is the representation of how a line anapest would be scanned, with the U indicating an unstressed syllable and the double line diaresis. So W, then look at now, these lines are quite clear to you and you can look at that. This is called anapest. Then this antagonist. The antagonist was the character against whom the protagonist struggled. Today the antagonist is usually known as the villain and the protagonist is known as the hero. Then episode. The episode is the part of the tragedy that falls between choral songs. Orchestra. The orchestra was the round or semicircular place for dancing in a Greek theatre that had a sacrificial altar at the center. Peripeteia is sudden reversal, often in fortune of the protagonist. So peripeteia is therefore the turning point in Greek tragedy. Then comes the strophe. Choral songs were divided into stanzas. Strophe turn and antistrophe turn the other way. So an epode added song that were sung while the chorus moved danced. So while singing the strophe, an ancient commentator tells us they moved from left to right, while singing the antistrophe, they moved from right to left. The next term is tetralogy. Tetralogy comes from the Greek word for four because there were four plays performed by each writer. The tetralogy consists of the three tragedies followed by a satyr play. So, created by each playwright for the city Dionysia competition. Then there's a theatron. In general, the theatron was where the audience of the Greek tragedies sat to view the performance, and in modern days it is called as a theatre. Then comes the special spoken element in the tragedy. Prologos, the opening before the entrance of the chorus. Pythia's opening prayer and Apollo's answers constitute the prologos. Then comes the episodos. Episodos, the developing scene. Then exodus is known as the final concluding scene. Then there is another term that is used as the typically sung element, that is called as parados. The opening ode sung by the chorus as they enter the orchestra. Similarly, there are the three unities, those are used in the tragedy. So let me go for these three particular unities. So Greek and Latin drama were strict in form. The stage represented a single place throughout the action. The plot recounted the events of a single day. So there were the three unities, those were observed in those days. So what are the rules? Let me go ahead now. Neoclassical Renaissance critic codified Aristotle's discussion, claiming that all plays should follow these three precepts. Number one, the unity of place. The setting of the play should be one location. In comedy, often a street. In Oedipus Rex, the steps before the palace. So, number two, the unity of time. The action of the play should represent the passage of no more than one day, particularly just one revolution of the sun. Previous events leading up to the present situation were recounted on a stage. At Prosperos tells Merinda of the events which led to their abandonment on the island. And in Oedipus, what happens? Oedipus demands his shepherd to come down, messenger to come down and tell him what has happened already. So all the action take place in one revolution of the sun. Then there is a number three, the unity of action. No action or scene in the play was to be a digression. All were to contribute directly to some way to the plot, and there should be relevance of all the action taken anywhere, but they are going to add up to the main action that is happening in the palace in the case of Oedipus Rex. So all the action should be uniform, and there shouldn't be any digression. They should serve the one particular purpose, and that is called the purpose of action. So this is how all these three, the unity of time, the unity of place, and the unity of actions are observed in. So unity of place mean, once again, you need to be at one particular place. The action should be completed over there, and the rest of the action, whatever the place they are being taken, but the main action should occur at one particular place, and it is happening in the case of Oedipus Rex in front of the palace. So the unity of time, unity of place, and unity of actions were the three important ingredients of the Greek tragedy of that time. So this is the basic introduction. Thank you very much for your patience, and see you later. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.